you'll know.
Okay.
So, all right, you ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right, okay. Welcome to Bite Me Season 1, Episode 26. Today the episode is going to be titled The Truth About Lakota Guy. He is my friend on TikTok. He is, you are of Lakota. Let's just have you introduce yourself. So tell us a
Okay.
little bit about yourself and
Yeah,
how would you like me to address you as the Lakota Guy today?
Lakota Guy's fine.
Okay,
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me on the show. I feel honored to be part of this awesome this awesome endeavor, and being able to uplift our voices, I think, is so important. So thank you so much. I first and foremost want to say that. But yeah, so I'm
sure.
Lakota Guy. I've been on TikTok. And I am a tribal citizen with the Sichango Lakota Oyate, the Rosebud Sioux Nation, one of 9 sovereign nations in South Dakota. And it's right next to Pine Ridge, for those that may not know, right off south of I-90. So that's
Yeah.
exactly that's where I'm at here. So I was basically born in Rapid, and that's how me and you got get to talking here was Rapid City, and all the awesome people.
Yeah. Awesome's a
Yeah,
word for it.
yeah,
Or I
right.
guess, as people would say, something else. Isn't that
Yeah,
what went down?
exactly. Yep. Yeah, I'm part of something else, I guess. So
Right. According
yeah,
to the voting standards, I guess. I don't know. Some
yeah.
people took that nicely and other people not so much. But, it wasn't mine to say anything about. But, native humor as was such, we're pretty gracious about it. So I think you've made it your own now. Um, so how are you doing today? You're good? You're ready to have some questions asked? And have
I'm as ready as I need to be.
Okay. All right. Very
Yeah.
good. So we're both pretty green at this, so we're going to get through it together. But I do have 5 questions for you, and then a couple more if we have time. But essentially, I wanted to ask you about a little bit about your culture, if you're comfortable with it, how that shaped you as a person, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the charitable efforts that you put forth as well. So the first question that I have for the Lakota Guy is who who are you on TikTok and what is your page all about? What would you say your videos are about? What do you look to put out there?
Sure. So my alias is Lakota Guy, at Lakota Guy. And I'm on Twitter at that Lakota Guy on Twitter as well. It seemed to be a working reference. It actually all came from an idea of not knowing what to name myself on a Twitter handle. So I was like, I guess I'm Lakota. I'm a guy, Lakota Guy.
Sure.
It's so complex, right?
It's
So
it's pretty catchy actually. So
yeah, exactly. And what I noticed on TikTok is it was an opportunity, because TikTok came from Musically. Musically was more about, like, having fun and dubbing music and everything. But what I
sure.
noticed an opportunity on TikTok is we have a generation of people there, and especially Americans, that are young and don't really understand, what Native culture is, what Native history is. We live under colonized history. So, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 41. I'm a father. I serve in the United States Navy, and I actually grew up with my culture. I'm not, what we call is disconnected and then reconnecting people, right? Reconnecting natives. And I've never been, disconnected. I grew up with my grandparents, who was a fluent Lakota household. So I remember hearing it. And it's funny because growing up, I always thought, oh, they'll always be around. And I just, I just wish that, I could fit in with everyone else. And you don't realize that time spent on I-90 going to A&W and back of your grandma's car and hearing them speak fluent Lakota back and forth, that will one day end. And
Yeah.
that's what I realized. And having that tool set that they gave me of culture, and just the outlook of what a native outlook is compared to colonized, and what America is, like putting community above yourself, putting homelessness above everything else, and putting
Sure.
and raising your kids in a way that they put their community above their needs, and those are just type of different types of things. So I saw an opportunity with TikTok to really emphasize on history, and me being, a historian and understanding and knowing about tribal history, federal trust responsibility, all that stuff. I've always made these little short videos trying to be, not only make it fun, but inquisitive at the same time, and say, wow, I learned something. I just didn't,
Right.
it's just not clickbait, or it's not,
Yeah.
racially charged clickbait. It's actual substance.
It sounds to me like what you're saying is you saw an opportunity to educate where maybe some of it was lacking.
Right.
especially in maybe the younger generation. You talked to us a little bit about sitting in the back of your grandparents' car and speaking fluent Lakota. Can you tell the people out there who aren't familiar, white allies or people who are ignorant to, your culture, can you just tell us a little bit about it, just I guess, in as much as you can I know that there's probably a lot to tell about Lakota culture, but if you could sum it up for us, the core values and things like
Sure.
that.
Yeah, we have Lakota values, but above that, just a little history about kind of who we are. The Lakota people occupied many different areas of what we call the United States, right? We called it Lakota Makoche. Makoche is Lakota for meaning land. And basically, what it meant for us is our grandchildren's land. We didn't have an ownership presence that, oh, this is my allotment, this is your allotment, right? So when we moved back to our ancestral lands of the Black Hills, that's basically where we were. And in 1868, 1851 and 1868, the United States government formed the Fort Laramie Treaties, and that's what basically formed the statehood of South Dakota today. And what that did is that it guaranteed certain lands to the Ochede Sochowin, which is the Seven Council Fires. And what that is that people always say, oh, it's a Sioux nation, great Sioux nation. And basically what Sioux basically means is that it comes from a Ojibwe word, Naduwasu, which means snake people. So when the French Canadian fur traders came in the English, they're like, I can't pronounce Naduwasu. So they shorten it down.
I was thinking that myself, but I didn't.
Yeah, right. So they're like, okay, we'll just go with Sioux. So that's kind of where this naming of our people were. But what we call ourselves as the Ochede Sochowin, which is the Seven Council Fires. That means all these different separate nations, the Lakota, the Nakota, and the Dakota, which is all different tribes ranging from present-day Minnesota, North Dakota, Saskatchewan, all the way up to Ontario, all the way down south to Nebraska, Montana. Wow. I mean, that's how large this confederacy was. And what it was is it was a confederacy of peace between these nations so that they were able to become one, what we call Tioshbai, which is a family together. So when we think about what the Lakota were, we actually derive from the Dakota Nation. And during Western expansion, there was a lot of tribes moving out west because territories were being taken up and treaties were getting broken out east. So, all these treaties we had with other nations like the Ho-Chunk and the Ojibwe nations and the all these other Cree nations, they started infringing on each other, going more and more. And then it started a war in northern Minnesota and started pushing down south. And at that point, the Lakota decided to break off from the Dakota and move out west. And basically, Lakota means ally. That's what the word means in English. It means ally, being an ally.
Well, that's very nice. But it's not right to assume that, like when we talk about like white allies, that the term Lakota could be used for that. You're speaking of like allies as in tribal allies.
Yeah, like we are allies with others and we're allies with each other. That's kind of what the term Lakota means. Yeah.
That's delightful. That's very nice. So is it right to assume that the Black Hills land is Lakota land?
Right. So it's not only our land ancestrally and from our creation story. Our creation story actually starts in the Black Hills in the Wind Cave area. The Wind Cave is actually, if I'm not mistaken, like a state tourism area now. But that's kind of where our creation story started, and that's where our ancestrals' land were. But we didn't stay there, right? The Lakota, before colonization, we had treaties with all these other nations, so we were able to have trade and all these things. I think one misconception with a lot of people outside of indigenous circles don't understand that if you look at rivers and streams, more likely than not, those were trade routes for indigenous nations going back and forth. We utilized rivers and streams as not only territories, but trade routes with each other. So that's kind of where that started. But when we think about legally, the Black Hills, and if you look at the Black Hills from 50,000 feet in the air, it actually looks like a human heart. And that's what we call the heart of the Lakota is the Black Hills. It looks like an actual human heart. It's really crazy looking. And for us in 1860 and 1851, we were guaranteed the Black Hills by the United States government. And then the Custer expedition came with a Custer gold rush and basically infringed on all that land. And what happened is that we decided to basically sue the United States government. And in 1980, the United States versus the Great Sioux Nation was a Supreme Court ruling in 1980. And the judge ruled in favor of the Sioux Nation, our nation, and awarded us $1 billion for the infringement and the illegal taking of the Black Hills, where Rapid City resides, surprisingly. But we decided to say to them that the Black Hills is not for sale. We don't sell our children's land. We don't sell our ancestors. We don't sell our grandmother. That's why that ruling exists. We do want repatriation instead of reparations. I think there's a lot of talk when it comes to, people outside the community of like, oh, well, if we were just get money and stuff, it's like we want repatriation. What that means is that we want the land that we were guaranteed via treaty back for our grandchildren. So we go back to the traditional ways.
Right. You want the land that was already granted. You just want them to make good on their word, which is what was promised to you initially. I remember not long ago, I made a post about, they're giving some of the land. Maybe you heard about it, giving some of the land back to the Native American people in a certain area of Rapid. And some of the Native American people here told me, I know that seems like a really good deal, but it's not giving us pennies of what they really owe us. And the scraps, essentially.
And what it is that, people always, and it's a big misconception that there was a war and, it was just, you guys were just conquered, right? But the United States doesn't make treaties with conquered people, right? And if we were conquered, we would get absolutely nothing. We would become into, slavery or whatever. But not only that, is that in Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, it says that treaties are the supreme law of the land. So if these constitutionalists, I'm such a constitutionalist, that's what I am, I believe in the Constitution. Well, then you believe in that the treaties are the supreme law of the land. And if you believe that, then you believe that the United States is actively infringing on not only the Fort Laramie Treaty, but 300 existing treaties with the United States.
Yeah, it's a lot of misconception for sure that goes on with the discrepancies between what white people have been taught in the school system, what people in general have been taught in the school system versus what actually went on. And so it's why I'm so happy for, connections like this, where we have the opportunity to educate people as we move forward towards hopefully a more progressive future. On that note, what has your experience been like living in the Midwest as a Native American person, and how would you say it shaped you?
I think you don't know when you're a kid, you don't know you're different until someone points it out, right? And I remember going to General Beetle, which is in North Rapid, if people aren't familiar in Rapid City, and I was one of maybe 2 Native kids there, and I didn't know it at the time. I was like, "Hey, I love everybody," because you're in first grade, and you're like, "Yay," and then you hear teachers talk to themselves, like, "Oh, those 2 little Indian boys over there," and I remember I remember distinctly hearing that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why aren't they saying, how come Lewis, let's talk about Lewis over here and his buddy, instead 2 little Indian, they had to describe us in this racial way.
Which, by the way, is not the proper term, correct?
Right. I mean,
for me, they shouldn't describe you like that at all, but just like that in particular is my understanding, a slanderous term.
Right. I mean, for me, I grew up with American Indian is a legal term. It's bound by not only our treaties, but I believe my ancestors own that term, American Indian. I've always grew up calling myself American Indian if it wasn't for Lakota, right? I mean, if you go to Florida, no one's gonna know what Lakota is. Oh, some white guy half drunk off some 2-for-1 margaritas isn't gonna know what Lakota is. I'm like, yeah, I'm American Indian, right? That makes sense. But these day and age, you got First Nations people, you got people in the Mesoamerica, South America. They prefer like indigenous. Some people prefer Native American. For me, I grew up with American Indian. So, and now that growing up in Racist City, I mean, Rapid City,
it's true.
I got used to being called that there because that's kind of like the nomenclature that they would have.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry that you had those experiences growing up.
And what I'm sorry, I didn't mean to not answer your question, but That was probably one of the first instances. And I think other than that, going to different areas with my grandma and grandpa, they would say, don't go to West Rapid, after 9, right? Don't go to separate areas after this time because you could come up missing, and growing up with these borders, and it's funny, it's like almost it's a safety border.
Invisible.
And invisible border that you can't go over there. And I remember hearing stories from my mom. Actually, I just talked to her today. I'm like, hey, I'm going on this awesome podcast. This lady, she's like, yeah, tell her the story about my softball. And so my mom, she loved playing softball, right? And Rapid. And she would often get called squaw by the opposing team. We hate you, squaw, because she was pitching. So she would strike out all these people. She was an exceptional athlete. And she would able to, overcome all that with, winning. But at the same time, even off base in Ellsworth, she had to deal with that. Not only that, she, was able to bead and do Native American beadwork throughout my dad's tenure at School of Mines to make sure that they had food on the table, right? So they would go to, off Haines there and North Rapid and West Rapid and sell their beadwork, and they get spit on, called squaw, all this other stuff. So hearing these stories, it's almost like micro traumas that you live with. And you always grew up in this type of fear of, like, if I end up at the wrong place in Rapid, I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know what's going to happen to my sister or my cousin, because, unfortunately, my aunts have been, victims of sexual assault in Rapid City, and the perpetrator being military people and them not getting persecuted by it because of jurisdictional maze that we go through, so correct. There's a lot to unpack there. And right. I think growing up, in small town Rapid and going back to Rosebud, and just, the thing is that we love human nature is to say, I don't want to be around those people. I don't want to be, and I remember hearing that from, people in my community saying, I don't want to be around the white people. I can't trust them because they're going to stab me in the back, or they're going to blame me for something. Or if, I take a ride with them, they're going to blame me for something missing in their car. We get no benefits of the doubt. Right. And growing up that, and I think not only going through the military, but going through corporate life and knowing that, man, like that is such a small town behavior, like not only how Rapid City reacts, but just that the whole state and how it treats each other and how it views each other as such a remnant of the trauma that is on that land. And and that trauma still resonates today, even with people not part of the colonization of South Dakota. It seems that, we still have those microaggressions still happening. And growing up that way, I've always learned to, not only stand up for myself, but just be loud about it. Because if we stop talking about it, people stop caring about it. And then it becomes like, oh, well, we don't believe you, right? It's like when someone goes through trauma and they don't believe it, like a woman getting sexually assaulted, what do we don't believe you, like show us evidence. It's kind of the same thing when it comes to racial trauma too.
Like not talking about it is to excuse it almost.
Right.
And I feel like maybe some of what you're saying also is like maybe you feel like you were treated as a second-class citizen on your own land.
Right. Right.
You asked me once what I thought, because we've spoken before. You asked me before what I thought about how Native American people could better bridge the gap between white people, and you. And I informed you that I didn't think it was on you guys' end, that it was on ours. How do you think that white people can better bridge the gap with Native American?
What if you just open? I think that there, and unfortunately I see it on TikTok a lot. There's a lot of trauma when it comes to what happened. And what we call it in the Native communities, generational trauma. And generational trauma, it's not an excuse for behavior, and it's not an excuse for bad choices, because we all make bad choices. But when we see systematic oppression in communities of color, what you're seeing here is you're seeing trauma being expressed over and over again. And what that ends up doing is that it deteriorates things like self-worth. It deteriorates people like feeling good about who they are, their identity. It deteriorates community and the wholeness of a family, like a father, mother, people that care about you. So, you insert that with drugs and alcohol and all that type of stuff. And then you have people like me and my uncles that make, we're working 9 to 5 and then we get called a drunk Indian for no reason, like those type of things. And I think it's important for allies to understand, okay, so, first of all, I have to understand what generational trauma is when it comes to not only the Native community, but other communities that I interact with. And I think that's the first step. And the second step is understanding that we don't want anything from the white community. We don't want you to feel guilty of your ancestors. And we don't want them to feel like, oh, you should cry every day or feel really bad about, what white people did that you had no control over, all those things. What we want is that we want everyone to be educated on the true history of how this country was founded and how we are today and what made us the way we are today and what systematic oppression exists today. Because when we are able to recognize that, not only as Indigenous people, but our allies, we hold greater power. We hold greater economic power, social power, political power to make the changes necessary for not only our community, but for our kids, so that our kids understand microaggression. Our kids understand, what these systems were put in power that ultimately led to the systematic oppression of people that were here. So, what I would say for our allies is to have empathy. And in this society, it's so hard to have an empathetic heart. That guy should get a damn job, right? Or, why is that guy homeless? Why is that guy drinking? There's so much judging going on and not enough empathy to understand what's the trauma behind this? Or even people being upset with you, like, F you, you're at a stoplight, right? Like, why is this person acting this way? And I think empathy for us goes a long way.
It sounds like you're saying that you feel, and I feel this way too, human compassion has gone very much so out the window, I think, over the course of the last 10 to 20 years. And it sounds like what you're saying is you just want to be looked at. And it's almost sad to hear you have that request, because I should think everybody should deserve it, but you want to be looked at, as a human with, human issues and be treated like we would any other human. And I'm so sorry, on behalf of all white people. And I know you say you don't expect white people to apologize, but I just hope everybody out there is listening to this and really internalizing what you're saying, because I think it holds great power.
Well, and now, and like I said before, I mean, we had talked about this in length, and I really enjoyed that conversation, to be honest with you, because it was such a refreshing, honest look at, man, like two people that come from different walks of life can say, you're a human being, and I respect you as a human being, and I honor your journey, no matter how hard it was for you to get to where you are right now. I honor that because you're a decent human being. And I think if we have those conversations with each other, a lot of this misconception will go the other way. And looking at each other as human beings and saying, well, I may not understand what it is to be Lakota. I may not understand what it is to be Native, but I know you want to be a good father. And I know what it is to try to make your kids go to hockey at a certain time in the morning, and put skates on and all that stuff. And we all want our kids to have these opportunities. We all want our kids to feel proud about who they are. And it's tough to do that. And it's it feels like we always have to acknowledge, like, please look at what systematic oppression has done to us. Just don't look at me as who I am today. And, Lewis, you're such a success story. Oh, you escaped poverty. There's amazing things happening on the reservation. We have universities now. We have people reconnecting with their language. And I think the problem is that you have Diane Sawyer with ABC News going to Pine Ridge and doing all poverty porn. Look how poor these people are. Look at how awful their family dynamic is. But you know what Diane Sawyer missed? She missed the idea that systematic oppression put us there. And not only that there is amazing people that are doing amazing things on the reservation. We use this word resilient. Oh, the Native community is so resilient. You guys are so resilient. Stop calling us resilient. We're, we are, like, if you were in our position, you would be doing the same thing. You'd be going to school at night, working a day job just so your kids can eat, just to get out of poverty. We are human beings. We're not here to be, looked at as some sort of poverty porn or some archaic relic of the past, because it seems like Diane Sawyer, the news, mass media, loves natives being in the 1800s and, post treaty, right? And I'm here to say, man, my kid plays hockey. He loves Daft Punk, he loves,
Oh my gosh.
new music, but he also grass dances, and he knows his culture, and he's learning his Lakota language. So, all those things. And if we could respect each other that way and say, hey, man, like, we have a lot of things in common, and I could be empathetic to your journey, that would go a long way.
Speaking of things that go on at the reservations that are towards more of a humanitarian effort, things that people don't see, that they don't talk about, that really you wish that they knew more about, let's talk about what you do with I've got your website here, Eagle Outreach. Let's talk about that and what you guys do at Rosebud.
Yeah, so Eagles Outreach started, I think, I want to say it started a lot later than we wanted to. Let me put it that way, right? Because we were sitting here in a COVID situation last summer, and I thought here, in the morning, I was like, what's going to happen to Rosebud? Because they're under lockdown, and you know how Christy Nome is. I mean, it's just atrocious the way she's been managing the COVID situation. And, we're not going to close down. And then Sturgis happened, and so you think to yourself, when there's children out there that are in lockdown, that they're barely getting an education, because I know what it's like with my son. He barely pays attention to some of the classes he's looking at, because he's in a COVID situation. He's doing remote learning. So
it's not normal.
It's not exactly, and it's hard. So for me, I was thinking about that with a couple other my family members, like, man, we got to do something with Rosebud, man, because those kids are going to have a hard time. Their parents can't work because they can't leave the res because of lockdown and stuff. And if they do, they may catch COVID, and you got elders and stuff. So I was like, let's see what we can do together. And it was September, and we marked it down for December. So our organization became a 501(c) that fall. And we became a partner with a lot of these organizations that gave backpacks, snow gear. And we worked with a ministry actually in Rosebud that has connections to all these other food networks. And we were able to get 4 semis full of food and over 600 Christmas and wrapped Christmas gifts. And we did that all here in Minnesota. And we worked with these organizations to get them on the reservation, so that these families had not only food for a small amount of time. I wish I could do it every week, if I was a rich man,
Right. But we can't help you, Jeff Bezos,
Yeah, I know. God forbid. God forbid we have trillionaires. But yeah, so like I said, 4 semis full of food. We had over 600 gifts, wrap gifts. And what more importantly, we did it with dignity. And what we see a lot with the reservation, and what really makes me upset, is as a Lakota myself, I remember being poor and getting gifts from, and I don't want to, this is not a racial thing, but white Christians. And these gifts were at like poor value. They were old, they were dusty. They were like, oh, here, let me take a picture of you. They took a picture of us with these little gifts, and they felt good. They left. They didn't come back. Right. And I said to myself, I'm going to give a gift like I'm that kid on Rosebud that wants a really nice gift. So we wrapped them, made sure they had dignity, make sure they were nice. And I think when you give to other people, always do it with dignity. And that was the foundation of Eagles Outreach. And next summer, we were hoping for this summer to do a 3-on-3 tournament, basketball tournament there. And this winter, we hope to do the same thing with not only food, but with gifts. And we reached 3 communities there, and there's over 20 communities in Rosebud. So you can imagine the need was great. And one of the most heartfelt things I felt was when I'd get calls from people in other communities of Rosebud saying, hey, I heard you guys were getting gifts. And I'm like, man, we ran out, and it was so gut-wrenching to tell a dad, man, look, I work 4 jobs and we just don't have food. You got anything? And I'm like, man, I'm sorry. I just don't got any, and that motivated me to keep this nonprofit open so that we could do more and more of it. And that's kind of the goal of our nonprofit.
So speaking of Eagles Outreach and you talking about how you wish you could do more, people listening to this, what is a good way to get in touch with you? What can they do? Can they write letters? What are you needing
Yeah.
people?
So, I mean, we would love people, especially if you're in Rapid City, if you're in Sioux Falls, Pierre, any of those major areas where they have, big stores and stuff. If you want to get involved, go to eaglesoutreach.org. That's our website. You can contact me, the email there. It'll go directly to me, so I'll respond to you. And we would love for anyone to be a part of it. And what we want to do is make connections with businesses, because I believe people have a good heart, especially a lot of the small businesses. They want to make change. They want to do better. I mean, Jeff Bezos, no. Like Apple, no, right? But, you got, a lot of these businesses, they have a heart for their people because they know what it's like, and a lot of these businesses are like, man, at the end of the year, I would love to write off, a certain amount of money and give back to the community at the same time. So it's like a win-win. So if we were to have a coalition of more people that could reach out to a lot of these businesses, say, hey, we need gloves, we need mittens, like we need, basketballs, all these other needs that are in Rosebud, and not only that, Pine Ridge and other reservations, that would be great. So if they want to get involved, please, you don't need to be native, you don't need to be, anything like that. You just have to have a good heart and a big heart. We call it Chante Washte, which means a good heart in our Lakota language.
That's wonderful. Well, I mean, that pretty much wraps up the questions I have for you and the episode today. For anybody who's out there listening, as Lakota Guy said, you can go to eaglesoutreach.org. That is the website. You can talk to him directly. Also, follow the Lakota Guy on TikTok. You're really going to like what you see there. If you like me, you're going to love him. As always, feel free to check out the Truthful Groomer website. Tell me what you thought of today's episode. The link tree is in my bio on TikTok. And always follow me on Twitter and Insta as well. Lakota Guy, I want to thank you so much for being here today, and I hope that we'll talk again soon.
All right, Wopi Latonka, Kola. That means thank you so much for having me on the program.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure too. We'll see you.
All right.